Hi everyone, welcome to what I think is episode 11 of Books with Jen. If you're listening to this on YouTube, in the description box down below there'll be a link to the playlist where you can watch all previous episodes where I've got interviews with Max Porter, Janet Ellis, Tracy Chevalier, many different people. If you have downloaded this to listen to it, you can find previous episodes at www.jen-campbell.com/podcast. Today I am talking with the excellent Louise O'Neill, real life mermaid, person extraordinaire. I read Louise's first book, Only Ever Yours, when it came out in 2014. It's about a school where girls are trained to be pretty and good and always willing for whatever the person that they are paired up with wants them to be. It's a novel where girls are pitted against each other, are constantly ranked, and it's an amazing, hard-hitting and cutting social commentary. Likewise, her second book, Asking for It, is about rape culture and explores so many cruel aspects of society. And what I particularly love about Louise's books is the way that she creates very complex, flawed characters who we perhaps don't always like and can show us really unpleasant parts of ourselves that we don't want to acknowledge, as well as being books that also give an amazing reflection on the complexities of society as well. She has 2 new books out this spring. The first one is Almost Love, which is geared towards more of an adult audience and is absolutely brilliant. It's about Sarah, who was once in a relationship with a man called Matthew, a very emotionally manipulative relationship. And it's her thinking back on that and how that has affected all of her consequent relationships and how she hasn't dealt with a lot of things in her past. Then another book of hers that is coming out is called The Surface Breaks, which is out in May, and it's a feminist retelling of The Little Mermaid. Louise, as you might gather, is a woman after my own heart, and I was so thrilled that I got to meet up with her and talk with her this week, because I feel like we've already met, even though we haven't. This is what happens with the internet. And because of that, I realised when I sat down to edit this podcast that we didn't really introduce it properly. So I'm just going to launch you right into the middle of the conversation. We were too busy, chatting away to each other to actually think about introducing the podcast properly. So I apologise. So I'm going to go to this interview now. And the question that I just asked her was, so you're on the publicity train right now with your new books, and how is that going?
It's good. It's interesting. Doing publicity is always a little bit strange, because you're just talking about yourself and your book, over and over and over again, and you do start to get slightly bored of your own voice by the end of it. It's been an interesting experience this time because I think I've been really taking care of myself. I think the last, for Asking for It, which was my second novel, the publicity really, it nearly broke me because, it was just interview after interview after interview, and I wasn't really eating properly, and I was drinking, and I wasn't, sleeping, whereas this time I honestly treated it like it was a marathon. Mm-hmm. So, I've gone to the gym every morning, I've, eaten really well, I've got, after an event, let's say 8 o'clock, I'm like, no, I'm just going to go back to the hotel, and I'll get something to eat there, and I'll go to sleep, and just really trying to take the best care of myself possible, so that I will have the energy to kind of make it through the whole thing. So it's been interesting.
Yeah, don't you think that's not the kind of advice that people give you before your book comes out? And I always like to tell people that have food on you, because people forget that you need to eat, not in a horrible way, but just you're traveling and then you're there and then you're leaving and you're going back to your hotel. So many pot noodles. Too many snacks. Pot noodles. Oh my God.
There's lots of nuts and fruit and, little snack bars, protein bars, whatever in my bag, just in case that I... as you said, it's not a bad thing. It's just that it's so busy, and you're just trying to keep up with the schedule and make sure you make all your, you hit all your marks on time. So yes, carry food.
Food. And how do you deal with that? Because I think I'm still getting used to it. The duality of it, being, after watching your Instagram stories and feeling like, kindred spirit, being in your dressing gown writing and then going out and having to be fabulous. And not that you're not fabulous in your dressing gown.
No, I'm really not.
But we both are together. But then and then going out and talking to people, and the book is a living, breathing thing that people have read, and it's not just yours anymore.
No, you're right, and it is a strange duality, and it's using very different parts of your brain. And I think what I found interesting is that the part of the publicity, I'm good at it, you know, that sort of way. Like I said, I find it very easy to talk to people. I find it very easy to, you know, public speaking I'm very comfortable with. But I think I realised after a while that I wasn't sure if it was very good for me. And that I found it quite draining. You know, you're giving so much of yourself. And afterwards I would feel really empty and really hollow. And when you're someone like me who tends to fill up that kind of hollowness with addictive behaviour, it was something I had to be really, really mindful of to make sure that I felt okay in it. And then obviously when I'm at home and I'm writing and I have my routine and just going to the desk every day, I think that's when I feel most centred and most grounded, and that's why you do it. But obviously the publicity is part of the job, and it is really nice to get to meet, you know, last night we had an event here and you know, it sold out really quickly, and you know, people come and you know, it feels like they respond so deeply to the books, and that's why I do it. You know, it's like the reviews are nice and, you know, the awards or whatever are nice, but it's actually that face-to-face contact with someone who's read your book and it's really meant something to them, which is lovely. It also slightly makes me feel like a fraud, you know, when...
Why?
Well, I think when they get very excited they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm meeting, you know, Louise O'Neill, and I'm like, but I'm only me. Yeah, exactly, you know, and it just feels like this, oh God, I feel nearly embarrassed, but also it's lovely, but it's just that I think imposter syndrome sort of kicks in.
Yeah, I think you've got to then just remind yourself of when you've met someone like that, right?
Yeah.
And you've been like, oh my God, it's someone. Who has that been for you when you've met someone?
I never really get starstruck. I think, and I was saying this to someone, one of the best parts I think about getting older and feeling more secure in myself was that I just felt like everyone is equal. And I suppose having worked at Elle, you know, a fashion magazine, and working with a lot of celebrities on set, you very quickly just get desensitized to the idea of celebrity. So, I mean, unless I met Beyonce, in which case I would fall to the floor and like be like, you are my queen, you are my lord and my savior, what shall I do for you? But everyone else, I feel like I'm relatively chill.
Yeah, I think that is nice. I agree that seeing, and especially going to book festivals and seeing authors behind the scenes and how stressed out they get when you think that they're just going to be super cool.
Yeah.
I think I completely like freaked out when I met Caroline Duffy for the first time, which is maybe not your typical, oh my God, kind of thing, but at the Edinburgh Book Festival, I just didn't know what to say. And I was 19 and I was just like, will you please sign my book? And you could tell, I recognize now that look in her face where she's like, I want to say something to you, but I don't know like how you're going to respond, so I'm just going to sign your book and smile. and then go and then let you run away.
But it's nice when you meet someone like who, you know, whose work has really meant a lot to you, or who has you know, influenced you in some way as a writer. I think that can be a very special moment.
And finding out that they're a nice person.
Yes.
Because it's lovely. The worst when you meet someone and they're a massive dick.
I know. I'm trying to think. I've been relatively lucky. Most people seem to have been pretty nice, but yeah, we'll see.
Let's rewind and go back to the beginning. How did writing life evolve for you?
Well, I was working for a fashion magazine in New York, and I had, at that stage, I think I had the idea in my head. I'd had it for a few years that I really wanted to write, but I wasn't, I can't say I was a writer. Like, I wasn't someone who, you know, I always kept a journal, and I would have, at university, I would have written, you know, essays, and obviously for college, but I wasn't someone who was constantly writing, you know, short stories and poetry and, you know, I was submitting to journals or, you know, anything like that. I think I was so afraid of failing that I never gave myself the space to try. And then I'd had the idea for Only Ever Yours when I was living in New York. And by the end of that year, you know, my visa expired. I had to move home. My boyfriend broke up with me. I had €50 in my bank account and no sort of way of, I was like, when am I next going to get money, you know? And I think everything fell apart, so I just fell with it. And there was this feeling, I was like, I'm just going to take this year and I'm just going to try and write. And Only Ever Yours it just seemed to flow. Like, I feel like sometimes I wrote that book in a fever dream. It just, like, there were large passages of it afterwards that I had no recollection of even writing. It just seemed to just come out of a very deep part of me. Yeah, I always feel a bit guilty when people are like, you know, I've been writing since I was 8, and I'm like, well, I kept a diary and I loved writing stories. But no, I think Only Ever Yours was the first proper attempt.
But I think that's nice in a way, because then it's fresh and it's new and it's exciting, and, you know, we've been brought tea. Thank you so much. Thank you. So it's something that you're coming to, having loved books for a long time, and now you're channeling it in a different way, and it's just a different kind of experience. I don't think you have to be like, I've been struggling for so long.
I know. Okay, well, that's good. I feel, again, you're like really helping with the imposter syndrome here, Jen.
That's okay. So how long did Only Ever Yours take then, if it was a part of like a fever dream? And
I think the first draft was, I think it was 5 or 6 months.
Okay.
And it was much longer than it is now. I think it was like 100. I had read somewhere that an average novel was 130,000 words.
Oh wow, that's not true.
Yeah, so I just kept going until I got to like 130, and I was like, the end. Like literally mid-sentence, the end. So there was a lot of editing that needed to be done, but yeah, it was about 5 to 6 months of like writing 7 days a week, and 1,000 words a day, pretty much.
Yeah.
So
that's intense.
It was intense, and actually, I am a quite intense writer. As in, when that's how my process seems to work. Is that I completely lock away the outside world. I just make this little cocoon for myself where I don't drink, I don't really go out that much. It's just a very quiet kind of existence where it's just me and the book and my pajamas, as you're very well aware. It was a little bit harder with Almost Love and with The Surface Breaks, which is the 4th novel, because like I had with Only Ever Yours and Asking for It, I had Asking for It written before Only Ever Yours came out, so I still had that the freedom really, because there was no other demands on my time. And then when Asking for It came out, obviously there was quite a few demands on my time, just around publicity and around travel.
Just a bit. I mean, I hear it was a little bit successful.
Just a tiny bit. So it was. I had to make a really conscious decision in 2017. To tell my agent, look, I'm just a blanket no, unless it's something really, really you think like is really important or really special, because I just need to create that silence again, and obviously that's partly why I live in the country, is because for me, and look, every writer is different. Like I know other writers are like, no, I need to be in the city, I need the bustle, I need to be observing people all the time, whereas for me it's like I need this sort of silence that would suggest that the apocalypse has come and everyone is dead within like 100 miles, so if my parents are even in the house, I'm like, shut up. Sorry. They're very patient, I have to say.
No, I'm with you on that. Just me and my dog. Yeah, and that's it.
What's your dog called?
Lola.
Oh, I don't even know.
She's very sweet. And our tortoise Penny Slow, but Penny is very like undemanding.
Okay.
She's quite quiet. She sometimes rustles in the corner. But when I was interviewing Claire Fuller, she said that she always likes to have the next book finished before the one before comes out.
Yeah.
I am not. Well, I was going to say I'm not that good at doing that. I am with picture books, but not with full-length books, which I think is probably what counts the most. But I understand that, because not just the demands on your time, but the pressure as well, which I suppose maybe you didn't anticipate before Only Ever Yours came out.
No, I didn't. And I think it was a really strange experience sitting down to write Almost Love, because it was the first novel that I had written since I was published.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to start in January 2016, and by June 2016 I was like, still too scared. Like every time I sat down, I just felt so paralyzed by, not only I suppose the success in a way sort of paralyzed me, but also the weight of expectation. People saying, well, what issue is it going to be about? And also I think feeling as if, because Asking for It, particularly in Ireland, I suppose seemed to, it was, I think the catalyst, I think people wanted to have that conversation. I think it was just a useful way of doing it around sexual consent, and I felt as if my work can actually make a difference. And then that felt like just almost too much to handle, because I was like, does every book have to make a difference? Does every book have to sort of make a shift in a national conversation around a topic or an issue? And I honestly felt like my fingers had sort of seized up. And so I think it was trying to shut all that out, trying to say, come back to myself, go, well, what is the book that I would want to read? Not even necessarily want to write, but what is the book that I would want to read? I think I deliberately decided not to, though to be fair, I thought I wasn't writing a political book, and then afterwards when I read it, I was like, oh, you're dealing a lot with gender and privilege and class and wealth. I was like, I just can't help myself. But I think I did just want to just bring it way back and say, am I an author? Am I an activist? Can I be both? But I think primarily that I am an author, that I am artist, that is sort of that is my job, So
you
we'll
can't
see.
escape politics either.
Oh, you can't. No, not especially as a woman. Like it is part of our everyday experience. You know, the political is the personal. So even when as I said, when I'm trying not to write something that is overtly political, just of the mere fact of being a woman that exists in this world, it of course it's there. You know, of course issues around gender and feminism kind of creep into the work.
I finished reading it. It's amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Amazing. I actually also listened to it, and the narrator, which is really, I don't normally listen to fiction. I normally listen to non-fiction, but I was like, no, I'm going to listen to this one. So I've listened to
What was her voice? Who's narrated? I presume it's a woman, is it?
I can show you later.
Okay.
I can show you, but
It's
it's amazing
her
because
voice
now
nice
I'm
and lyrical.
It's so lovely, and now because I'm reading The Surface Break, that's what I hear in my head as I'm reading it, and I really, really love it. But it's fascinating because obviously we want flawed characters, but you have created such amazing flawed characters, and with Sarah, I love her, and I'm so frustrated by her.
I know.
I'm like, Sarah, no.
It's so funny, but I get text messages, people like, she's not going to do this. She's not going to do this. She's not going to do this. And then it's like, for fuck's sake, Louise. And I'm like, I'm sorry.
So let's talk about Sarah then. How do you go about creating someone like that and deciding what they are going to do in certain situations?
Yeah, for me the characters are always what comes first. Like I'll have, you know, the general sort of idea. I'm like, this is what this is going to be about, and then, you know, like a very, very vague sort of overarching plan. Like I don't go into the specifics before the characters are really, really ready. So then with the characters, I have, like, it's all very high tech. I have like an A4 pad for each new book, and I'll do like mini interviews with each character that take around 10 A4 pages, and it's stuff like, it's even things like, you know, the secret that I've never told anyone, you know, my greatest fear. So like the reader will never know this, but I feel like I need to think of these characters as like really fully fleshed human beings. And it's a bit like, you know, if I gave you a scenario and I said, how do you think your mother would react in this, you have a pretty good idea because you know your mother so well. You're like, I'm 95% sure that this is how she would react to this situation. So for me, I have to be that familiar with the characters so that they feel that real to me, so that I have an understanding of why they would behave like this. And I think with Sarah, she's so flawed. I think she's a masterclass in how damaged people inflict damage on other people and on themselves unless they actually process that trauma. But she just doesn't have the emotional reserves, and she also hasn't had the support. You know, I mean, I've been in therapy since I was 17, and I think I would be a very different person if I didn't have that. Just, I think that examination of my own behavior. Why am I doing this? What are my triggers? Like, why do I react this way? Why is this really like upsetting me? And I suppose I am very analytical in that way, and very, like, probably pathologically self-aware, and because of that, it just makes it so much easier for me with characters that maybe other people are like, what is going on here? And I'm like, well, because of my interest, I think, in human psychology, I'm very much trying to create very, very complex, complicated characters that behave, like, you know, and trying to understand that motivation and hopefully bringing the reader along with that as well.
Yeah, and I admire that, because I think with a character like Sarah, it's difficult to talk about specifics without ruining it, which I'm not going to do, don't worry. But you could lead them in a certain direction. You could say, this is a path not to redemption, but this is her learning and doing all of the things and learning how to act correctly. But people aren't like that. They're very difficult, and they don't follow the narrative that maybe like someone else would like to read.
I know. And I agree. And I think that, you know, maybe my books, I mean, to be fair, I'm not hurting, but like I was like, maybe my books would be more commercial if I had, you know, slightly more charming, you know, characters. But I think as an author, I'm just not that interested in that. I mean, I love, like, I have a real, you know, yen for other people's like really charming, lovely books, and I don't mean that as an insult. Like, I really enjoy reading books like that, and I really enjoy going, oh god, I loved that character. Oh, you know, she was just so amazing, and, you know,
and that
fun
resolution,
and warm, and you know, and there's, but I think there has to be a space for all types of fiction. And for me, the thing that I'm always trying to get to with my work is emotional honesty, and that sometimes can feel really painful, like even when I'm doing it myself, because I'm trying to get to the darkest parts of, not like, you know, of myself, but like, you know, some parts I'm like, I don't really like this about myself, I'm going to shine a light on this and sort of try and explore that in my fiction. Or, you know, parts of the friends might say to me, you know, like, they're like, I'm really ashamed of this part of myself, and I'm like, well, those dark parts are also what make us human, I think, you know, and it's about trying to accept them and not acting on them. I think that's maybe the problem with Sarah sometimes, is that she is quite impulsive. But again, as you said, there's not necessarily redemption, but I do think that Sarah, I think, will always be a prickly character. I think she'll always be a prickly person. But I think that, you know, she's also very young. You know, the novel is sort of 23 to 28, and there's massive learning in those years. I mean, I always say, and I'm being really honest here, I was like, I was such an asshole until I was 26. Like, I behaved in ways that I would be very ashamed of now, and I don't think are reflective of the person that I am now. But I was just trying to figure out my own way. Yeah. So she's not a monster.
No, she's not a monster. And I just realised that I'm a terrible person. I'm the monster because I've left my phone on. Where is my phone? It's behind me. But also, there are different kinds of satisfying books. There's that satisfying book where everything gets tied up in a nice bow, and then there's the satisfying book that actually gives you something that you feel is true and real, and even if it makes you angry or you think you wish a character hadn't done that, afterwards you think, no, okay, that you know, that's all right.
Yeah, that was the path that they were supposed to take. I think, you know.
And reading the book is like having that argument or difficult conversation with a friend where you walk away from it feeling like angry. I'm making it sound like your book like made me feel really frustrated, didn't. But you walk away and you think, and then you think about it and you think back on who they are and everything going on in their life, and you think, all right, no, I can come back to you and
we can work this out. Yeah, exactly. And I think what's been really interesting is to see, because obviously asking for it, there was a real response to that, and with Only Ever Yours as well, but obviously asking for it because of dealing with sexual violence, you know, that people wanted to share their stories. But I've been really taken aback by the level of the response to this even stuff, because it's only out 2 weeks.
I know, and I've been seeing on your Instagram stories that loads of people messaging you.
And after a while I was like, I can't keep screenshotting these because there were so, I think I probably got about 100, and it was all on most of it actually were on private message on Instagram, because this was, you know, people didn't want to share them publicly. And they were so fascinating. Like, people, I think what I found most interesting was people saying, I felt really uncomfortable reading this book because I think actually I had to face up to parts of myself that I'm ashamed of, or I didn't want to admit that they were there. And also, I mean, it's been really juicy. Like, people have been like, these are my Matthew stories. You know, this is my Matthew stories. And then people telling me, and like some of them were heartbreaking, like genuinely heartbreaking. You know, like very young women who were manipulated by older men. And I think what's interesting is that, like, a lot of people found Emma, in asking for it, to be an unlikable character, but because she was the victim of this brutal sexual assault, people obviously could find empathy for her. Whereas I think with Sarah is that she's complicit in her own degradation. Like, she's a willing participant in this. Like, you know, Matthew never promises her anything. So, and I think that's what haunts her, and that seems to be the thread from the messages that I'm getting from women, what haunts them as well. They're like, I don't know why I behave like this. I don't understand how I seem to lose all sense of myself and my personal boundaries and just made a fool of myself. And I think that's actually what is the hardest thing to cope with afterwards, is you're like, I sort of did this to myself. And you're like, I feel like I am a strong woman. I'm a feminist, and I trying to understand this dual self. And I think, you know, it's something that I think I mentioned. There was an interview in the Irish Times, and I think it was a throwaway line in every single interview that I've had since over in Ireland. They've all asked about it, where I said the hardest place for me to maintain my sense of feminism is in a straight relationship, like a relationship with a straight man. For me, that is the hardest, because I think we fall so instinctively into these ideas of traditional gender roles, and they want you to be a certain type of woman, and I'm like such a fierce feminist in every part of my life. And then I think it's because I want that connection, or because you love someone and you don't, you know, you want them to love you too. And it's been really, and I think it's definitely lessened as I've gotten older, and I can definitely see going forward that I'll be more aware of that. But it has been, and then you feel very weak. You know, you feel weakened, and you feel like you've sort of let the cause down, and it's a bit of a mind fuck, to be honest.
No, absolutely. Also, this book is about feeling good enough, right? Or not feeling
definitely good not enough. Feeling good enough.
Definitely more that one, and not just in relationships, but in work life, and in especially in this book to do with art.
And it's something I'm really interested in.
Have you found this in the literary world when you were starting out? I don't know how prevalent it is with novels, but I found it in the poetry sphere. being a young female poet and then lots of older male poets who want to be your mentor and look after you, and you think, oh my God, I love your work and this is amazing, and sometimes they are just really nice, but then sometimes there's a little bit of PS there.
And I think that is something. I mean, I have to say I've been pretty lucky. That is in most. It's actually been with younger men I've had experiences. Most of them are so nice, but sometimes at book festivals, it like they really undermine you, and they'll sort of basically neg you. Where it's like they'll make kind of cutting remarks about your work, and I can tell them like, okay, this person just doesn't like value me or see me as a peer, which is fine. But then a few drinks in, they're trying to like drag you to their bedroom, and it just makes me feel really cheapened, because it's like, oh great, not only do you not think my work is good enough, but also you just see me as like a walking vagina, do you know? So it just is sort of like a double whammy.
But it's sometimes not even that they don't think that your work is good. Maybe they haven't even read it, but they're going to tell you that your work is not that great and they can help you. But that is not what that means.
I don't need your help. I'm fine.
I was at a book festival, and it was I was there, and my 5th book had just come out. I was talking to this one guy whose first book had just come out, and he was like, oh, here's my business card. If you ever need help writing short stories, call me. And I was like,
I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Also, I've read Jen's short stories. She does not need any help from anybody.
You're so sweet. When you messaged me saying you had read them, I was like, oh my God, Louise.
I absolutely loved them, because they sent them to me. I was like, oh, what a beautiful cover. And I couldn't stop reading. They were just so like just beautiful, like really beautiful. I just thought incredible.
Thank you. Well, you're a woman after my own heart, because now you're writing about the Little Mermaid.
Yes.
Or you have been writing about the Little Mermaid. It just thrills me. When it was actually my publicist at Two Roads, she said, have you heard that Louise O'Neill is writing a feminist retelling of the Little Mermaid? I was like, oh my God, what? So this was last year sometime, and I was like, oh my God. So I'm in the middle of reading it at the moment. I love it. So
thank you.
What is your relationship with the Little Mermaid?
Well, I mean, I was 4 when it came out. Like, it's prime age. I think women in their late 20s, early 30s, we were, because there hadn't, I'm trying to think, it was something like 30 or 40 years between, the last Disney princess and like, so the Little Mermaid just kicked it off.
It was 89, right?
Yeah,
89, it was the first one I saw at the cinema.
But I'm sure the one before was like 59 or something. So it was like a massive a gap, and so it really just kicked off that whole like idea of Disney princesses. And I was just... See, I lived by the sea, and I also was like, my mom would have said, she said you were just such a water baby. Which is funny because I'm a Pisces, but she was like, if you were really upset, she said, I just want a bath. She said, as soon as you got into the water, you were fine. And I was, even as a child, just constantly wanting to be in the sea and there for hours, and like my parents had to drag me, like shivering with like wrinkled hands and just like a raisin. And so I was obsessed with the sea, like this kind of elemental. Just couldn't stop looking at it, just wanting to like be a part of it. And then when I saw the Little Mermaid, I was like, oh my God, there's a possibility that I could go live there forever. And
Ariel, we could change places.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to be here. I want to be
there. And I think as well for me, and I don't think I could recognize it at that age, but definitely as a teenager, I think there was a part of me always that felt like a changeling. Always felt very different, and very. I'm so close to my parents and to my sister, but very different to them. And this kind of, I felt I always wanted more for myself and saw myself achieving more than what maybe the world thought I was capable of. My mom would have said, she was like, even as a very small child, she said, I could just tell. She said there was just no containing you. She said I just knew, and I was like, I'm going to be famous. I'm going to be, I had this idea for ages that I had been reincarnation and that I had been sort of like landed gentry in a previous lifetime. I was like, why do I not have servants in this life? I don't get it. And so I think I could identify with her sense of longing, longing for something more, knowing that she could have more, or she wanted more than, let's say, the world told her that she was capable of having or that she deserved. But then as a teenager, and I suppose into my 20s when I started, my very burgeoning sense of feminism really began to sort of, take flight. I suppose I reread, particularly at university level, reading Angela Carter and then reading original fairy tales. And I'm like, wow, this is really dark. The original Little Mermaid, that she literally silences herself and mutilates her body in order that a man will find her attractive. And I think I could see the parallels even, I'd had anorexia and bulimia as a teenager, like really like setting myself on fire, basically, like, you know, like just self-sabotage to the extreme where like I was harming, like it is a form of self-harm, in order to fit into sort of these very narrow parameters of what was considered attractive for the male gaze, really, you know. I mean, obviously anorexia is much more complex than that, but that's definitely played a part. So I think when Scholastic came to me and said, you know, we would love you to rewrite The Little Mermaid, like a feminist retelling, it sort of felt like, oh, I'll get to reclaim her. Yeah. I'll get to sort of give her the story that I always felt like she deserved, that she wasn't just this cipher, that she was this very vulnerable, you know, complex character that I just wanted, I don't know, just to, as I said, just to reclaim her, you know, for a new generation. No lofty ambitions here at all, you know.
It's just all very chill.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that The Little Mermaid has always been, or mermaids in general, have been really interesting to explore new territory like that, especially people on the outskirts. I think she's a great symbol for queer culture too, as well.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Well, Hans Christian Andersen wrote The Little Mermaid because he was in love with a man.
Oh.
Yeah, and he was called Edward.
How did I not hear this? You've no idea how much research I did into The Little Mermaid. So.
He was in love with his friend Edward Cullen, and we've got letters that he sent to him saying, you know, I want to be with you. I can't believe you're going to marry this woman. And so The Little Mermaid for him was an exploration of what it means to pretend to be straight in a world which says that you can't be who you are.
I love that.
I know. I'm halfway through The Surface Breaks at the moment and loving it.
Thank you. Well, actually, it was funny afterwards to see the parallels between Almost Love and Asking for It, because, Almost Love and The Surface Breaks. You know, like, they're obviously both of their mothers are dead, and you know, Sarah's obsessed with the sea. You know, that's kind of constantly what she goes back to, and also they're both about women being silenced in relationships, like literally. I mean, obviously, literally in the case of The Little Mermaid. So I think it was really interesting to see that these were obviously themes that in both novels that I was kind of trying to work out. But you know, one is for ostensibly for adults, Almost Love, and then the other one is for YA. So
but I think that's fascinating about writers, though, that we have these topics that we want to mine again and again.
I think we're trying to work. We're trying to work through them.
Yeah, we're trying to understand ourselves.
Yeah,
right?
No, I agree. I agree, and it is just trying to work through issues or themes or motifs that like really like I think are so deeply embedded within ourselves that we write to take it out of ourselves, you know, like one letter at a time onto the page, just to carve it out of ourselves. Very violent description of writing there.
I like it though.
Yeah.
But also, do you feel that you write that and then it's out and then you talk to people about it and you think, okay, I can look at that again from this angle now that I've explored it with other people and thought about it.
No, I agree. Well, I love when you're talking to academics who've, you know, written essays, particularly I think on Only Ever Yours and Asking for It, and they always make it sound way more intelligent. They're like,
do you just go, yes, I intended
that exactly. Like, oh my God, yes, of course that's what I meant. I don't even know what that means. But to be honest, once I'm finished a project, I'm very much like next one. Like I like to kind of move on to the next thing as quickly as possible. I'm a bit like a shark. If I don't keep moving forward, I'll die, sort of thing. But you know, I'm really proud of these two books, and it's lovely. You know, it's lovely to have. You know, this is probably my favorite, but I have to say then it's funny because Marion Keyes said that The Surface Breaks is her favorite. So I think they're all quite different. So hopefully there'll be something for everybody.
There definitely is. They're brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Books with Jen. Please go and check out Louise's books. If you're listening to this on YouTube, they'll be linked in the description box down below. If you're listening to it elsewhere, go to your local bookshop, track down her works, and devour them. I hope you're all having a great week, and I'll speak to you very soon. Lots of bookish love. Bye.